In our video today for You on the News, Bernie Sanders goes after Benjamin Netanyahu and House Speaker Mike Johnson, and Bernie also sheds light on the destruction Israel has caused to Gaza's educational system and what children are going through in Gaza. And U.S. Congressmember Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez calls out Supreme Court Justice Alito, and AOC also asks the head of the Secret Service during the assassination attempt on Donald Trump an intriguing question. Let's get started with Bernie Sanders shedding light on the destruction Israel has caused to Gaza's educational system and what children are going through in Gaza.
Every one of Gaza's 12 universities has been bombed. Got that? Every one of the 12 universities in Gaza has been bombed. More than 400 schools have suffered direct hits, and 56 schools have been totally destroyed. Today, 625 children in Gaza have no access to education at all. And I'll tell you something else. When you talk about what's going on in Gaza, what is not talked about almost at all, I think I read one article on this, I want you to think about the psychic damage done to children. The children who see housing being destroyed, their parents or relatives being killed, see drones flying around them, some of which have guns, being pushed out of their homes, deafening noise, inadequate food, inadequate water, shoved into any place and every place. What kind of psychic damage? If there's one child in Gaza that does not suffer psychic damage from this horror, I will be very surprised. Now, Mr. Netanyahu's been on TV today and elsewhere. He denies it all. Ain't true, says Mr. Netanyahu. He claims that Israel is deeply worried about the civilian population, worried about the children, and that Israel is not blocking humanitarian aid at all. Not at all. Well, it turns out that the United Nations and virtually every other humanitarian group involved in the humanitarian disaster in Gaza strongly disagrees with Mr. Netanyahu. Now, we can trust the words of a prime minister under criminal indictment in Israel, or we can trust the people whose function in life is to provide humanitarian aid. UN Secretary General says that much more aid is urgently needed to, quote, to avert an entirely preventable human-made famine, end quote, and that there is no alternative to the massive use of land routes, end quote. Cindy McCain, the wife of our former Republican colleague John McCain, who is now the head of the World Food Program, said of Gaza that, quote, there is famine, full-blown famine in the north, and it is moving way south, end quote. A month ago, more than 50 humanitarian organizations called on Israel to allow greater humanitarian access and stop unnecessarily restricting aid. That's 50 humanitarian organizations. Mr. Netanyahu says one thing, but 50 organizations who are desperately trying to get food to hungry people say something else, and let the world decide who is telling the truth. And this group of humanitarian organizations included Catholic Relief Services, CARE, Mercy Corps, Oxfam, Save the Children, Refugees International, and scores of other well-respected humanitarian organizations. They say that Netanyahu and his team have blocked humanitarian aid. Mr. President, anti-Semitism is a vile and disgusting form of bigotry that has done unspeakable harm to many millions of people for hundreds of years, including my own family, I might add. But it is outrageous and it is disgraceful to use the charge of anti-Semitism to distract us from the immoral and illegal war policies that Netanyahu's extremist and racist government is pursuing. But, Mr. President, how can or how will the United States be able to criticize any country in the world, whether it is Russia, China, Saudi Arabia, or anyone else, any other country in the world, if we pretend that what is happening in Gaza, if we actually believe what Netanyahu is saying. If we turn our backs and ignore the crimes against humanity that are being committed in Gaza right now, what credibility will we ever have in criticizing the actions of any country, no matter how terrible those actions may be? Because people will say, oh, really? You're attacking China or Turkey or anybody else? Really? You're really deeply concerned? But apparently, for Netanyahu, it's a lie. We don't believe you. And I don't want to see this great country of ours be in that position. I want to see this country respected all over the world as a country that does believe in human rights, that does believe in international law. So the ICC, as I see it, is trying to uphold international law and minimum standards of decency. Our government should do no less. You know, Mr. President, we, as we all know, are in campaign season. And I would say to Speaker Johnson that when you attend your fundraising dinners with your billionaire friends and you eat your fine steaks and your lobsters and your other wonderful food, please remember these pictures from Gaza. This is a photograph of a child in Gaza taken by Getty. This is a photograph of a child, and his or her mother, taken by Reuters, and one doubts very much whether that child is alive today. This is a photograph taken by Al Jazeera. And this is another photograph taken by Getty of a child who I can't imagine is alive today. These children and thousands more are the direct result of Netanyahu's policies. Netanyahu, the man Speaker Johnson has invited to address Congress. No, Mr. President, I will not be in attendance for that speech. I yield the floor.
Also in Bernie Sanders news, Bernie Sanders said the following: "The time has come to cancel all medical debt and guarantee healthcare to all as a human right, not a privilege." Now let's get to AOC and start off with AOC asking the head of the Secret Service during the assassination attempt on Donald Trump an intriguing question.
You established earlier that the building upon which the shooter operated from was outside of that established perimeter, correct, for the Butler, Pennsylvania event?
It was outside of our secure perimeter, yes.
Now, that building was, I believe, 500. How far away was that building from the president?
It was approximately 200 yards.
200 yards. Now, the individual used an AR-15 in order to act out his assassination attempt. An AR-15 has a range of about 400 to 600 yards. My question is, why does the Secret Service perimeter, why is the Secret Service protective perimeter shorter than one of the most popular semi-automatic weapons in the United States?
There are a number of weapons out there with a number of ranges. Again, an advance was completed. The determination of the perimeter, I'm not going to speak to specifics, but there are a number of factors that are taken into account when we determine our perimeter. Some of it has to do with terrain, some of it has to do with buildings, some of it has to do with assets and resources that are available.
And so what I'm hearing is that a perimeter was not established outdoors in an outdoor venue that would prevent an AR-15, which is one of the most common weapons used in mass shootings, from being able to be within the range of Secret Service protection.
A perimeter was established, and even though there were buildings that were outside of that perimeter, it wasn't just that building, there were a number of buildings in the area, and there was overwatch that was created to help mitigate some of those buildings.
Now take Justice Samuel Alito, who has no shortage of billionaire associates of his own. After billionaire Paul Singer gave Justice Alito a luxury fishing trip on a private jet, a contribution that was also hidden from the public and the court, Justice Alito not only refused to recuse, but changed his mind regarding his gracious host's case. Just a short time after accepting the lavish undisclosed trip from Singer, Alito joined the court in reversing its previous position and took up Singer's case. He did not recuse. Justice Alito also refused to recuse in the case itself, ultimately leading to a ruling that netted Singer $2.4 billion. And that ruling did not just enrich Singer. It also structurally tilted the playing field further away from working people and towards the vulture funds, siphoning money and resources away from the communities that need them most. Could a reasonable American question whether or not Justice Alito could have acted impartially in this case, given his personal relationship with Singer? Absolutely. In January 2021, after the former President of the United States incited an insurrection on the Capitol in this chamber to interfere with the results of the U.S. election, Justice Samuel Alito and his wife flew an upside-down American flag, a symbol of solidarity with the attack, outside their home. 2 years later, they publicly displayed outside their home yet another incendiary symbol, a flag associated with extreme right-wing Christian nationalism. Justice Alito maintains that his wife, Martha Ann Alito, is the only one responsible for the flags. But common sense maintains that such a close and incendiary revelation requires recusal by the justice from January 6 related cases. Despite the overwhelming appearance of a conflict of interest, Justice Alito refused to recuse himself from cases surrounding the 2020 election and questions of the former president's legal immunity in the attack. Would a reasonable person question that Justice Alito's conduct exhibits and demonstrates reasonable concern for bias in these cases? Absolutely, and without question.
AOC also said the following: corruption without consequence infects all it touches. Congress must exercise its powers to impeach. The corruption of Justices Thomas and Alito constitutes a clear danger to our democracy. I move to impeach them because it is the right thing to do for the American people.